Good morning. Hope everybody had an enjoyable evening yesterday evening, and thanks to our the EPA for organising this, and thank you to the EPA for the invitation to speak this morning. As Anthony has said, sorry, no, if I can get this to advance. Okay. I'm just going to have a look at water services, an overview, just going to talk about some policy issues and flag some things that are on the horizon. I suppose just to start, like, there are international things that drive our policy, right? UN Sustainable Development Goal 6, clean water and sanitation, the UN Water Action Initiative. These are very important from the point of view of how Ireland, I suppose, engages on an international stage in terms of water and our delivery against the requirements of these initiatives. Then there's the EU legislation, which we're all very aware of and very active in delivering against. And then there's the OECD recommendations on water and water governance. So these are the very high-level international elements that drive our national policy. And then our national policy is, well, we have a new water services policy statement, which I'll come to next. And then there's the water directives, which we're all very familiar with. And then there's a couple of other directives and regulations, which we're not that familiar with, but are on the horizon and are worth pointing out, which is the Critical Entities Resilience Directive and the Water Reuse Regulations. Okay, Water Services Policy Statement 2024 to 2030. It was published in February this year. And the key principles of this policy are compliance with the EU water legislation, delivery on SDG 6, and then the OECD recommendations. And there's a bit of repetition in that from the first two slides, but again, I think we don't think about those international UN Sustainable Development Goal 6 and the OECD stuff that often. We don't see it that often. So it's just to kind of reinforce that in people's consciousness. So the policy statement, it's a high-level policy framework, and it sets out how we're going to deliver water services, and it includes an obligation to protect and enhance the environment. And then there's objectives and priorities. They're the government objectives and priorities that are going to be pursued to ensure delivery and improvement of our water and wastewater services in the coming years. So these are the objectives. I mean, and this is very high level. It's just 3 objectives and the associated priorities. So initially, it's the availability and reliability of our water services, and that's going to be delivered through continuous investment in infrastructure. That is an investment with Uisce Éireann and with the group water sector sides. Then safety and quality. And then this is about ensuring that drinking water is safe and the environment is protected. One of the key things, and Lorraine from Uisce Éireann is going to talk later on this morning on drinking water source protection. And I have a slide or two on drinking water source protection as well. Minimising contamination in our water. Effectively, that's the Water Framework Directive, ensuring we get to high quality status in our water bodies. And again, we need effective and robust regulation of the sector. And then finally, sustainability. We want to ensure that the water services that we're providing to the public are sustainable. We can meet our climate targets. And water conservation is a cornerstone of the policy. And if I go back to something that Fenton said yesterday morning, he spoke about take less, waste less, use less. And if we look at water conservation, that's that middle stream of that. It's waste less. We have to use the water we're taking from the natural environment in the most efficient way we can. And I suppose it's a key factor for water services sector moving forward. From the policy statement, Uisce Éireann are developing a strategic plan out to 2050. Now, I think Lorraine and we may touch on this as well, but it's under public consultation at the moment, and that public consultation runs until mid-July. So I would encourage people to have a look at that and to give their input and feedback. Okay, so we have our water action plan, our river basin management plan, and it's due to be published soon. And I suppose it outlines numerous actions to improve the delivery of our water services and to reduce the impact of our water services on our natural water environment. And there's a number of key actions, one being the sectoral action work plan for urban wastewater, another being the continued investment in wastewater infrastructure, and I suppose again the focus on nature-based solutions is also a key factor. The Drinking Water Directive, and this one is close to my own heart. I'm working on this for the last number of years. So there's a number of deliverables and challenges coming up under the Drinking Water Directive in the coming years. The first deliverable is drinking water source protection guidance for the industry. It has been finalised and it will be published in the coming weeks. And it's basically a framework for the delivery of drinking water source protection for all water supplies. And I suppose, and again, Lorraine will be talking about this in more detail, but I think it's a great opportunity for the, I suppose, drinking water sector to show the good work that's done by the sector and how it is actually minding the environment and protecting the environment in the longer term. Then there are new monitoring parameters to kick in under the directive in 2026. There's been a lot of work done by Uisce, the EPA and the HSE on the initial notification record process in relation to these new parameters. And there's also work ongoing in the development of joint position papers on various contaminants by the EPA and the HSE. So it's very, I suppose, active at the moment. And this work is being led by the Drinking Water Expert Group and a number of subgroups. But it's only by the participation of the stakeholders, and many of you are in the room today, that we can deliver against this directive. The other thing that has to be done in January 2026 is a leakage assessment reporting to the European Union. So the directive is specific. It applies leakage reporting requirements to water suppliers supplying more than 10,000 litres, 10,000 metres cubed a day. And in Ireland, we have only one water supplier that fits into that category. Uisce has well over 700 water supplies. So there is a bit of confusion here on what are we reporting on to the European Commission. And I suppose I've just broken down the big water supplies into the sizes here. We have only 23 water supplies that are over 10 megalitres a day. That's supplying nearly 3.3 million people. And that's 73% of the public that are the population that are on public water supplies. But then there's a cohort under that between 5 and 10 megalitres a day. That's another 400,000 people. And then you step down to 3 to 5 megalitres a day. That's another 350,000 people almost. So like in that total bundle, there's over 4 million people. But it's a lot of water supplies. So we have started engagement with the European Commission on what actually we'll have to report on in this, because the water supply kind of structure is different here because we have a single entity as the utility as Uisce. So we're going to have to engage with the Commission on this, and we started this process with engagement from Uisce, the EPA and the CRU, because this is something that's now regulated and we're going to have to report on it. So it is a challenge, and there is a lot of work coming up on this. But again, people are engaging on it, and we will, as I said, we will get a sensible result out of the Commission, I'm confident. Just final slide on the Drinking Water Directive. All the things that are coming up in the next few years is the FSAI are leading on the development of a food business organisation exemption under the directive, which has to be delivered in January 2026. And again, coming back to the drinking water source protection, catchment risk assessment reporting to the European Commission in July 2027. That's the first step in terms of drinking water source protection. And if we look at it this way, there are over 650 water supplies across the country greater than 10 metres cubed per day, and we have to report on them. So there's a very large volume of work in that area in the coming years. Another thing in the Drinking Water Directive was access to water and providing access to water. In the department, with the help of Ishgéireann and the National Federation of Group Water Schemes, we delivered 2 pilot schemes over the last 2 years in terms of putting in drinking water fountains and seeing how it can be delivered. And out of that and the success of those pilots, Ministers O'Brien and Minister State Smith launched the Drinking Water Fountain Scheme last week. It's a fund initially of €2 million being provided by DEC to deliver on this, and it's going to be rolled out through local authorities, Ishgéireann and the National Federation. But again, it's a key thing, making sure that people have access to water. And I suppose we had a tradition of, the parish pump, which has kind of disappeared in the last 30 years. But again, this is kind of bringing people back and giving them access to water, on the side of the street in a controlled and clean way. Okay, this is a new directive, the Critical Entities Resilience Directive. It came into force in January 2023, and it's to be transposed by October this year. It's the Department of Defence are leading on this, and it's replacing the previous Critical Infrastructure Directive. But critical entities are entities that are important to societal function, the economy, public health and the environment. And there's 11 of them defined in the directive. And water, drinking water and wastewater are basically 2 different sectors under this directive. But the directive includes other sectors like health, transport, energy, banking, food production and distribution. So it's a very wide-reaching directive. But it does impact on the water sector, because within the water sector, we're required to identify critical entities and identify a competent authority. And the thinking at the moment, the logic is that the critical entity is Ishgéireann, and the competent authority is proposed as the EPA. And I suppose the process of implementing this directive is basically to develop strategies to ensure the resilience of the critical entity, so that it can react and recover from any potential disruptions to that essential service. So that's, again, transposition at the end of this year, and then it'll be implemented over the coming years. But again, it's something that probably isn't on everybody's radar. The water reuse regulations. The water reuse is the use of treated urban wastewater for agricultural irrigation. Not something we do much of in this country. In terms, we don't really do agricultural irrigation on a widespread basis. So this regulation requires us to carry out an evaluation of the applicability of this regulation within Ireland. And with the help of ARUPS, we have undertaken this evaluation. And it's looking at climatic conditions, status of our water resources, and the costs associated with using this recycled or reclaimed water. And it's drawing on River Basin Management Plan, climate change projections, and stakeholder engagement. The outcomes shows that it is a feasible solution for water scarcity when it's encountered. It also shows that there's an opportunity here with the new Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. There's going to be higher treatment standards to quaternary and tertiary treatment required on larger urban wastewater treatment plants, which will produce a much higher quality effluent. So again, there's an opportunity maybe there. But there are many challenges with this directive, not least the public acceptance. What will the public think of using treated urban wastewater for agricultural irrigation? Then there's also need for a regulatory framework around it if we were to implement this. And there's an economic viability piece. I suppose the outcome of the assessment at the moment is it's not happening, and there's no pressure from agriculture to actually use this as a resource. But again, this is a cyclical reporting requirement with the Commission. So we're going to have to turn around in the next cycle and report again. So in the next number of years, we're going to have to do some research and pilot project on this to look at its feasibility, to look at its acceptance, so that when we come to report again in the next cycle, we have something more up-to-date and meaningful to report to the Commission. And finally, just to highlight nature-based solutions, this work is being led by my colleague Avril Gannon in the department, but there's a huge cohort of people engaging in this, and there's a couple of recent publications that I just want to highlight. One is the nature-based management of urban rainwater and urban surface water, and the other one is the rainwater management plan guidance for local authorities. Both of these guidance documents and strategies were published in May this year. And it's just, again, to take the opportunity to highlight them to people who may not be aware of their existence. So that's me done. Thank you very much. And again, just to say thank you, and if you have any questions, we'll be able to take them at the end.